In the Kremlin today, they are openly celebrating victory, as Donald Trump has simply enriched Russia by starting a war against Iran and failing to keep it under control. Because of Iran blocking the Hormuz Strait, India has started buying oil from Russia at astronomical prices. The price of Russian Urals oil in Indian ports has reached a record high of almost $122 per barrel. And of course, there's no talk of any discounts now, nor of an oil price cap, or even sanctions, by the way. Overall, since the start of the war in Iran, the price of Russian barrels on the Indian market has jumped by more than 100%. And that's even though the Kremlin had budgeted the price of oil at $59 per barrel this year. And the actual price without Donald Trump dropped to $35 to $40. But that's not all. Unfortunately, because of Donald Trump's actions, the European Commission decided not to present a bill on April 15th for a complete ban on importing Russian oil into Europe. The European Union admitted that they are postponing the decision to completely stop using Russian oil for now, since a global crisis has erupted in the world, again because Iran is blocking the Hormuz Strait. I'm Pechiy. Let's discuss this topic. But before we start this episode, I want to ask you to support the work of this YouTube channel by subscribing or with your donation or sponsorship on YouTube. All links and details are in the video description. I appreciate any support you can offer. But do it at the end of the episode if you think it was interesting and useful for you. And also subscribe to my Telegram channel Pechiy News. The link to it is also in the description of this video. We post there promptly, breaking news as it comes in. So, I think it's time to admit that the American President Donald Trump has thrown a real party for the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin. Because of the conflict in the Middle East and the softened sanctions policy of Washington, Indian oil refiners are massively buying up Russian Urals crude, pushing the price to levels that haven't been seen before. Well, at least since February 2023, when the US, Europe, and the EU finally hit the Russian oil industry with sanctions. But then Donald Trump comes, starts a bloodbath in the Middle East, can't take control of this war now, cancels sanctions against Russia and Iran, and here is the result. Russian Urals oil, for the first time since the start of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, began to be sold in India at a premium to dated Brent, which is the key global benchmark used by physical oil refiners. Once again, throughout all the years of the full-scale war against Ukraine, Russia was forced to offer discounts or markdowns on its oil just to get anyone to buy it. Now Russia is demanding not a discount but a premium. Let me explain. Dated Brent is a reference price for physical oil deliveries at a specific moment, which is used as a global basis for the vast majority of oil contracts in the world. And it is based on the Brent grade, which is considered the benchmark, and from there the prices fluctuate. And just recently, it was recorded that in Western India, Russian Urals oil reached a price of $121.65 per barrel. This is the highest level since the end of February 2023, and now the saddest and most astonishing part. Such a price for Russian oil has even surpassed the price of the benchmark grade, which hasn't happened in many years, if not decades. Russian Urals oil has never been more expensive than the American Brent grade. And here you go, under Trump, even this is possible. The conflict in the Middle East has significantly reduced the global oil supply, which has triggered price turbulence in the market. Against this backdrop, the US. They allowed buyers to purchase Russian barrels located on tankers in open sea without the threat of sanctions. They say there were sanctions, now we're lifting them. Previously, before this green light from Washington, India was actually actively reducing its purchases of Russian oil as part of trade negotiations with the US earlier this year. That's why the demand for Russian oil has recovered. Key Indian oil refiners, Indian Oil Corporation, the largest state-owned oil refining company in India, and Reliance Industries, a private industrial conglomerate that operates one of the world's largest oil refineries in Jamnagar, have already purchased tens of millions of barrels of oil from Russia. And now, Here's the most interesting part. Remember, US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said that they are lifting sanctions on Russian oil, but only for the oil that is already on tankers at sea. And as for the rest of the oil, this lifting of sanctions supposedly does not apply to it. So, it has come to the point that even barrels that haven't been shipped yet have seen a price increase. On Friday, the average price of Urals in Russian western ports was almost $90 per barrel. This is the highest level since the end of July 2022. Although it should be noted that it is still unclear whether Russia is directly benefiting from the difference between export prices and the price at the delivery port, the so-called delivery spread, or if this margin simply goes to the intermediaries. It's unclear. But still, it can be stated that Donald Trump has effectively nullified the entire effect of Western sanctions against Russia that were imposed since the beginning of the full-scale war. Just imagine that. Once again, this is the first time since July 2022 when the oil hadn't even been shipped yet. It costs $90 per barrel? One more nuance. The current price of Urals is significantly higher than the average figure of $59 per barrel set in the Russian budget for this year. This means that every barrel sold brings the Kremlin at least $30 more than planned. The increase in oil revenues is filling the state treasury at a time when Russia is now in the 5th year of the war against Ukraine, specifically its full-scale phase. Under these circumstances, Russia is receiving up to $6.5 billion extra every month. Despite this, Moscow still plans to cut spending in order to contain the growth of the budget deficit and avoid increasing borrowing. They've begun selling their gold reserves to help cover it, but still. This means that even oil windfalls do not eliminate the structural financial problems that Russia faces due to rising military spending. And here I should remind you that it was after a phone conversation with the bold, stinky dictator Vladimir Putin that US President Donald Trump announced a temporary easing of sanctions against Russia related to oil trade. By the way, I intentionally make these kinds of remarks so that Russians who, for some reason, keep watching my content, get all worked up. In this way, the United States is trying to contain the sharp rise in energy prices amid the conflict surrounding Russia. And at the same time, Trump hinted that these restrictions might not be reinstated in the future. He says, well, maybe we won't bring back the sanctions. We'll see. This means that they will be holding back price increases, while the US Secretary of the Treasury, Scott Bessent, said, listen, we're lifting these sanctions for literally a month. Just for a month, no more. Trump says maybe we won't reinstate them and just leave it as is. Moreover, US Secretary of the Treasury Scott Bessent also assured that Moscow would earn, quote, no more than $2 billion from this lifting of sanctions. Where did the figure of $2 billion come from, and what time period was used for the calculations? Of course, he didn't explain. Is it $2 billion per day, per week, per month? What is it? But as it seems to me, this figure was just, pulled out of thin air. Because neither Bessent nor Donald Trump really understands what to do with this war against Iran anymore. And on this matter, The Economist claims that Trump is trapped. They say the US has no good way out of the conflict with Iran. As the publication writes, after weeks of escalation around the Strait of Hormuz, Washington is left with only a few scenarios. And none of them look like a winning option. Essentially, the US has 4 choices. Negotiations, which are unlikely due to Iran's distrust, or they will end up being a loss for the US. Option 2, declare victory. But Tehran still retains leverage. Option 3, continue strikes without any guarantee of results. And the last option, escalate further, with a very high risk of a major war. Now, I'll quote The Economist. The key issue, the Strait of Hormuz. Iran still controls the situation and can put pressure on the global oil market. At the same time, even radical measures are being discussed in the US, up to and including a possible operation against the oil island of Kark. In the end, each option either doesn't solve the problem or leads to even greater risks. Right now, the US has no quick or easy way out of the conflict. And Trump has brought the situation to the point where even Europe has started to act cautiously. The European Commission will not present a bill for a complete ban on Russian oil imports on April 15. The European Commission representative Anna-Kaisa Itkonen stated that the EU is not backing away from its plans, but for now she says it's a risky step. The EU plans to legally enshrine a complete phase out of Russian oil by the end of 2027. A similar decision regarding gas with the same deadline has already been made, thankfully, but with oil it will be more difficult. A representative of the European Union stated that the document had to be postponed due to the current geopolitical situation caused by the war involving the US and Israel. And here, just think about it. Donald Trump is destroying the entire global structure that Europe and the US have been building for several years in just 3 weeks. The fact is that the hostilities in the Middle East have affected the largest participants in the oil and gas market, including Saudi Arabia and Qatar, causing massive supply disruptions and a sharp spike in prices. And here is the most important point. When planning to give up Russian energy resources, the European Union expected to make up for the lost volumes with supplies from the Persian Gulf countries. However, these plans are now under threat. The key reasons were Iran's blockade of the Hormuz Strait and the Republic's strikes on the energy infrastructure of the Persian Gulf countries. That's why I really hope that Donald Trump, and especially his voters and even more so his supporters who continue to watch my shows, I hope you are very proud of yourselves. Especially some of my subscribers who write in the comments, Pechiy doesn't understand anything. Donald Trump is a genius thinker. He's the most brilliant president of our time. You just don't understand his multi-step strategies. He has planned something that your mind simply can't comprehend. So, dear viewers, you know exactly who I'm talking to. Finally, write in the comments what you have to say about this. Are you proud of yourselves? Are you proud of supporting this, madman? This is the President of the United States' opinion who is destroying the entire structure. The US and Europe have been building a sanctions framework to pressure Russia for years. Trump comes in and with a snap of his fingers destroys all of this, just gets involved in a war they don't know what to do with, and allows the wild Russians to simply profit from continuing the war against Ukraine. Are you satisfied with yourself? Write in the comments. You love Donald Trump so much. I'll leave it at that. Your opinion, your conclusions, write them in the comments under this episode, subscribe to the channel, click the bell, and don't forget to like. If you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, I'd really appreciate it. You can do this through donations, subscriptions, cryptocurrency, or YouTube sponsorship. All the links and details on how to do this are in the description of this video. That's all for now. Take care. Bye, everyone.